just one to one, and they were absorbing the membrane of one inside the other. And then they would like go through, once one couple did that, all the paramecium started joining up together, and they would sink to the bottom of the pond. And paramecium don't reproduce through sex. They reproduce through dividing themselves, right? Self-reproduction. And so he was saying that the desire to couple, to connect to someone so deeply where you absorb, one is absorbed in the other, is biologically wired into us. It goes back millions and millions and millions of years. And it's a desire, essentially, a biological desire for love, right? And it's an energy that permeates all it's not just about power and hierarchies. And that he was showing other creatures that had something similar going on. And, in physics, we talk about entanglement, and we also talk about, matter. If matter isn't opposed by a lot of kinetic energy, it joins together. Particles join together to form matter, et cetera, et cetera. So there's something in the universe that's trying to connect things to each other. So there's this kind of energy that exists in the world where we have a deep need to connect to somebody with outside of those power dynamics, right? Where there's a degree of equality, where we're drawn to each other, and we let go of the ego games, we let go of the playing, we kind of surmount our own physiology, our own hypothalamus, and we engage in this, I call it love sublime. And it involves the physical part. The sexual part is the trigger for it. Because when you have sex with someone, your body is suddenly permeable to their energy in a way that you cannot control it. It releases all kinds of chemicals in the brain that are very powerful. And oftentimes, that sense is too powerful and you react and you're afraid of it and you pull back. But if you don't react and you go further, then the mind also becomes permeable to the other person and their energy and their desire. And so then it kind of creates a spiraling effect where the physical and the mental connection reaches the state that I call love sublime. Now, it's an ideal. It doesn't really exist that much out there in the world today, but there are stories in history that illustrate it, and I believe that is a biological necessity for us to feel a deep, deep sense of connection. We normally ascribe that to religion, to God, etc. But I maintain the essence of love, the model for love, is between two human beings, straight or homosexual, doesn't matter. And that feeling of surmounting our own neurology, our own system, and entering this zone is deeply, deeply satisfying. We all want it. And it has to involve letting go of the power dynamics, and everything being equal. It's not that the other person is exactly like you. You recognize their difference. But as far as being worthy of attention, being worthy and respected, you leave all that other stuff outside. So there is a zone that's possible, that's outside this power dynamic that we're talking about.
I'm excited that you're writing about this. So this is for your next book.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. I couldn't help but think of some of the parallels between what you describe and what we're observing nowadays in the landscape of politics and social dynamics, where clearly there is no setting aside of egos. People feel both sides feel attacked. Everyone in between feels confused, like, why do I have to pick a side? And there seems to be no hint of a future where people are setting down their swords, which means, if we were to go with your earlier definition, which I like a lot, that nobody feels safe enough to be vulnerable enough to allow the union of people to occur, which is just a way of rewording, a bunch of other things, and not nearly as eloquently as you described it. But if setting aside of power dynamics and making oneself vulnerable is the key to accessing love, in the romantic context, surely, but also in the societal context, what are the channels for that? I suppose there is the argument, not mine, that everyone should just take a boatload of psychedelics and see the interconnectedness of things. But that seems like an unrealistic route. I just don't see that being, 12th grade graduation curriculum. Nor do I think it would be healthy. To be clear, I think that we'd end up with a lot of expression of problems there. But short of a magic substance that could increase feelings of connectedness among everyone simultaneously, how are you going to save humanity, Robert?
Well, because I'm concerned about young people in particular with hookup culture, with pornography, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of rewiring the human brain, and we're losing what I was just describing. And I see particularly a lot of young people, and I don't blame them because they've grown up in a world that's very chaotic and very hostile.
Could I say, I think it's, and not to be nitpicky here, but I love what you just said. I think in my mind, things like that are hijacking the hardwiring of the brain.
Okay.
And I'm
You're right,
just,
you're right,
no,
you're
and I'm
right.
not, again,
It's true.
forgive me, the audience is probably going, oh,
You can't really rewire the brain
Right.
like that.
Well, I think we can expand and rewire upon our hardwiring, but so much of what you talk about in your books is about finding one's essence, but then also what I love about your book so much, many other things, is that it's about that dance between the hardwiring and the possible of through effort. So anyway, forgive me for being
No, that's very accurate.
So yeah, how do you get us out of this?
Well, you're putting a big burden on me,
but I think you're up to it.
well, I try to do it in this chapter because I wanted to seduce the reader into the idea that this is something extremely pleasurable and extremely healthy. And the feeling of being vulnerable is a very positive attribute that will infect not just your romantic relationships, but will infect you mentally. So creative people are extremely vulnerable. They're extremely vulnerable to ideas. They're extremely vulnerable to the environment. And closing yourself off into your own ego, into yourself. So the chapter is called Escape the Prison of the Ego. And you're kind of trapped inside of yourself and your own thoughts and your own desires. But it's like a prison. It's enclosing you, and you want to escape somehow. And you escape through drugs, you escape through porn, but it doesn't lead to actually escaping. You want to be able to let go of the self and get out of this prison that you're in, right? And so it's a desire that we all have. And so I wanted to frame it as this incredibly positive dynamic that you can engage in. And the ability to be vulnerable to other people, to open yourself up and to say that, yeah, they might hurt me, but I'm strong enough to take it. If they hurt me, I'll learn from it and I'll rebound. And I know that's a bit naive on my part, but I want you to at least have that feeling. Because a lot of people write to me and they say, I can't fall in love anymore. I don't like that feeling. I feel the loss of control is too much, and a lot of their behavior patterns are in creating this sense of control, which you can have when you're locked inside of yourself.
Hence, overindulgence in pornography, masturbation, etc., as a way to avoid the understandable fear about information.
So, when you're young, you're idealistic, at least a lot of people are, and you have these dreams and these hopes, and to let go of this possibility, which is deeply pleasurable and deeply therapeutic to the human now, as a social now. It's like the highest form of interaction. So my strategy in that chapter is to make such a wonderful portrayal of the pleasures that are awaiting you by letting go of your defenses, of letting go of all of your natural resistance factors, and opening yourself up to other people is a key to not just a romantic relationship, but to career success, to mental energy, to creativity, to being open in general, right? And so I don't think I could have a wide, a huge impact, but we'll see when the book comes out. But I'm advocating that sense of opening yourself up to the universe, to the cosmos itself, as an energy that permeates the world. And so that you don't want the feeling of being closed inside of your ego, inside of yourself. I want to make it so you feel the pain of that. Because you don't really feel the pain of it. You feel like it's comfortable for you. But I want to make it clear to you that it's not comfortable. It's deeply, deeply painful. And it's disconnecting you from some of the best experiences you can have in life. So I have that strategy. The only other hope I have is in the human spirit itself. So a lot of this is being caused by social media, I believe, right? Um, and the instant and the kind of immediate gratification we can get in so many ways. And my hope is that young people get fed up and get just disgusted with all this disconnection and alienation in their life, and that they hunger from actually something more communal, more interactive, more real as opposed to virtual. And so that the human spirit can't be completely squashed by technology, etc. So I have that hope because we've gone through these cycles before in history where people have become very invulnerable, very locked and closed, and suddenly there's an explosion, a creative explosion like in the 1960s, like in the 1920s, like in 18th century Europe with Casanova, where seduction reached its kind of apogee, etc. So it has kind of swung back and forth between these moments where humans get incredibly closed and bitter, partisan, and everything's conflict and everyone's divisive, etc. And suddenly it goes in the opposite direction. I have hope in that possibility, and I structured my chapter to perhaps sweep that a little along that tide and see if I can get anything better.
I think you just described the conversations like it and that stem from it are likely to have a tremendous impact. I think it's exactly what's needed now, and certainly I'll be to amplify that message. I agree with everything you said, and not just because you're sitting here as a guest on this podcast, but because it's clear to me that while power dynamics and seduction are wired into our human relations since the beginning of time, that we have reached a very challenging period in our history. It's somewhat of a relief to me to know that it's happening before, but in the context. We hear a lot about the sleeping back and forth someone either a team musicians, my brother actually said that. Credit thing. He said, no, it's not a pendulum that swings back and forth. Unfortunately, now it's directional, so it's swinging back and forth and doing damage as it reaches its its extremes. And I think that I also look forward to a time where people acknowledge that the injustices around them and that have been done to them and others, and but somehow are able to transcend that. And the word that I'd like to pick up on there is the word justice. It was pointed out to me by someone I respect very much that having a sense of justice is a wonderful and important thing, and as humans it's important to how we structure society. But I do think that a lot of the negative things that we see out there nowadays have something to do with the availability of ready availability of pornography, high density calorie food, etc., a bunch of things like that. But that one of the issues with social media, because it does have its positive aspects, but one of the negative issues in my mind is that it's a steady flow of examples of injustice. So all day long, you're just seeing things like that piss you off and that piss other people off, and for different reasons. But what was pointed out to me is that one of the key things about a sense of injustice is to be able to determine whether or not there's anything that you should do about it. And I think that everyone now feels a bit hijacked by all the injustices we see, because we feel like, well, we're supposed to do something about it. But it may be that while we can't let every injustice pass, that being bombarded all day long with things that upset us is hijacking our creativity, it's distracting us from our deeper purpose, it's preventing a sense of vulnerability that would lead to a sense of deep love, and on and on. So I don't think it's just about the tantalizing lures of sex, food, and looking at bodies and hearing voices on social media. I think there is some validity to that, but that it's also that there's just ample opportunity to go down the gravitational pull forces of injustice. Like, oh, that's so frustrating. Why are they doing that? I mean, I catch myself doing that. Talking to coworkers when I walk in about, did you see this thing? This is crazy. What's going on with it? They're crazy. When as opposed to thinking about anything else in that moment. And I try and yank myself out of that. But I think that you're not going to do it alone, but I think you will play a major role in saving us from this. Because I think because people just need to see themselves through a different lens and realize this is distracting me from who I'm supposed to be.
Well, a lot of what modern life should involve is the ability to ignore certain things. So, for instance, I don't know if you know that app Nextdoor.
Oh, right. I used to have it, but then I see all the packages being stolen off my neighbors' porches in Oakland. And then I started enjoying living in Oakland less, and I love the city of Oakland. It's got its problems, it definitely has its problems, but as an East Bay kid, you know, and went to school out there, and you know, like I have deep love for the East Bay, and it's always had those problems. But when you see stuff being stolen on your phone in the middle of the night when you wake up, it creates a sense that like they're out to get my stuff.
Right.
It's terrible.
Right, and so I have it in my spam filter, but I look at it, and every headline is people stealing, somebody broke into somebody's house, this dog bit me, this rabid dog going around, there's this homeless person that's yelling and attacking people, on and on and on. I feel like I'm living in this neighborhood, it's like Beirut or something in the 1980s. I can't even walk out my door. I don't look at next door anymore, I just ignore it. I don't open it ever. Because I know that they're designed algorithmically to put that in front of you every single time so that you click on it, because we respond to that kind of stuff naturally. We can't help it. So you have to be able to shut that stuff up and look at what you can actually control in your life. So I have this visceral dislike of what's going on in Ukraine, because I was in Ukraine recently and I've identified very strongly with their struggle, right? And that outrage feeling, every time I read an article about it, it just drives me crazy. So the only thing is I stop reading as much as I can. I read things that are kind of rational and intelligent, and I send them money, and I donate as much as I can, and I help them practically. But I don't allow myself to get that kind of outraged feeling all of the time. So somebody has to write a book, somebody has to instruct us in what to ignore and what to actually pay attention to. So there are things that you can control, injustices that are out there that you could control by voting, by amassing a movement, by dealing with climate change, not by trying to recycle every little thing in your house, but actually doing something really much more macro in the world, joining a cause. There are things you can do, and that's positive, and that's a way of channeling that kind of dark energy in you for a positive purpose. But it's totally disruptive, and it totally distracts you and weakens you and drains you of energy to fall into those rabbit holes and let yourself fall into them. So you have to learn the art of what to ignore and what not to pay attention to, and understand that you're wired to see those kind of red alert buttons on Facebook or on Nextdoor or wherever they are. And it's negative. It's like a candy rush. You have to avoid it.
And it's taking us away from our purpose, which we each have. I mean, I think to me that's the most deleterious aspect.
Unless your purpose is to organize and be an activist. People ask me, I wrote a lot in my human nature book about the shadow side of human nature, right? And we all have it. We all have the dark side. We all have hidden aggression. We all have feelings of envy. We all have feelings of grandiosity. We all have aggressive impulses. How do you deal with it? And I say the way to deal is to channel it into something positive and pro-social. And that can be putting it in your artwork, venting that anger, that outrage in something that people kind of can identify with. Or it can be in organizing something. That could be your purpose in life, in actually doing something positive. So that's the only way that you could actually use that energy for some kind of actual life's task or purpose.
Discussing lately a bit on some of your channels about masculine and feminine, let's say, roles, and crises of the masculine and feminine dance, as well as the crisis of masculinity per se, crisis of femininity per se. Do you care to expand on that a bit? I think we could probably take 3-4 hours to explore all this in full, but I was struck by some of the things that you said, because I agree completely that just as we are not given a roadmap when we arrive in the world as to how to find our purpose, I think there's also a very conflicted roadmap that's thrown in front of us, and indeed conflicting multiple roadmaps about what it means to be masculine or feminine or some combination of both, which of course everybody is some combination of both to varying degrees.
Well, so men have a feminine side to them, which if you try to repress it will come out in other ways. And women have a masculine side to them. think Jung described this very well with the anima and the animus, which I think is extremely real. It's very, very confusing times for both men and for women right now. We don't know the roles that they're everything is just so fluid, and it's very, very difficult, particularly if you're young. So young women are getting this idea that everything should be equal and that women should have, and of course it's right, should be paid the same, should have the same career opportunities, there should be no prejudice or harassment or anything. But at the same time, on social media, it's all about looking perfect, and looks are incredibly important. And if you're not hot, you're in terrible trouble. And a lot of young girls are extremely confused by this. They're getting mixed signals, right? And boys are even in perhaps even worse circumstance where being masculine is seen as something negative. So we don't have any ideals out there anymore of what constitutes a good positive form of femininity and a good positive form of masculinity. In fact, we even think that there shouldn't be anything like that there's no such thing as being masculine or feminine, whatever. It's very, very confusing. And so, I think of masculine traits that I think are very positive, that should be out there to kind of counteract the sort of Andrew Tate seduction that a lot of young men are falling for. And it's a kind of an inner strength where you're sort of in control of your emotions. You're not invulnerable, et cetera, et cetera. But you can take criticism, you can take, you can have moments of failure and you'll bounce back, but you have a kind of inner resilience and a kind of inner strength, a kind of a quiet calm that I think used to be exemplified in movie icons like a Gary Cooper type thing, right? And that kind of sense of inner calmness where you're not hysterical, you're not getting upset about everything that happens, where you have a kind of an inner strength and a confidence, and you can withstand kind of what Ryan Holiday talks about, a lot about with stoicism. You can withstand all of the hardships of life, but you have that citadel within you. Is a very, very powerful form of masculinity, as opposed to it's all about sleeping with a lot of women, having really fast cars, being abusive and being a bully, et cetera, et cetera. These are signs of weakness, of insecurity. And to be masculine should be a sense of security and inner confidence and inner strength, right? And that's what we should venerate in our culture, and we should have icons like that, okay? It doesn't mean that there's no role for men who are not masculine or who have more of the feminine virtues. There's definitely a role for that. And, we see a lot of that in all sorts of arenas of life. And then there should be a positive model for women, where instead of their appearances being judged by their appearances and having to conform to the ideals of what's hot or not, it's about being incredibly powerful and competent and have expertise in being really successful in your career, and as opposed to being continually judged by your appearances, which is very damaging. So these are terrible times. I mean, I feel fortunate that I grew up in a time where there were these kind of models for me to go by. And I think of my father, who was a very quiet man, and he was just a middle-class salesman, is basically what he was. He just sold for all his whole life. He sold chemical supplies for one company. But he was very dignified. He treated people well. He was very calm and very quiet, but he also was very empathetic. But that was my role model for what I think is a good masculine energy. And I think a lot of people just don't have that. They're very lost. So I don't know what the answer is to that. I can't really produce that out of thin air, but I wish I could.
Well, certainly nowadays there are many more, say, examples and options of masculine and feminine qualities out there for observation because of social media and because of the internet. And as you pointed out before, a key feature to becoming a functional human being, especially nowadays, is learning what to ignore.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an interesting idea in the circles around nutrition and health that never before in human history have human beings been able to access such a wide variety of foods that differ from what their ancestors ate. And ancient ancestors. I mean, if you grew up in the Bay Area, as I did in the 1970s and 80s, there were a few ethnic restaurants, but we ate the same, 15 or 20 foods over and over again.
Right.
And then eventually that exploded into dozens of options and more, and fusion foods and all sorts of things. And so there is this idea in the nutrition communities that we are not hardwired to think about and discern so many different food options that's and to taste so many distinct flavors, whereas before people in one portion of the planet or country ate generally one way in a given season, their seasonality, et cetera, et cetera. In a similar vein, we are now, and children too are now overwhelmed with the number of different options of how to express oneself, both masculinity and femininity, but generally speaking. And so the question is then, how does one choose, right? How does one decide what's functional, what works, what's best, what's me, right? Everyone asking themselves, who am I, right? I think all teenagers, I find this fascinating, ask themselves, who am I? Adults don't tend to ask themselves that question, but who am I?
I still ask myself that
Okay, well that's good. Maybe I should ask myself that more often. But I think that we clearly have gone over a cliff with this stuff. I don't think we are still at the point where we're kind of veering towards the edge of confusion. I think young people are really confused because the moment one assumes one clear and let's say balanced set of masculine feminine attributes, or maybe veers a bit more masculine or a bit more feminine, it's like there are a million examples telling you that that's wrong. And then sometimes has the tendency to anchor to, well, no, I'm right because this is who I am. And then all of a sudden we're in a larger battle. So, Gary Cooper's great, love his movies. But we now have a million variations on Gary Cooper that don't look anything like the Gary Cooper you and I are talking about. And a lot of people won't even know who we're talking about. But perhaps it illustrates the point. No, not that you're a dinosaur, but that there is no single or even set of masculine or feminine ideals. So picking role models is something that I really, truly internalized from your book, Mastery.
Yeah.
There were a lot of lonely years for me, and I won't get into the stories of just wondering, like, what am I going to do? I'm 13, my home was completely broken, no semblance of the reality it was before. Who are the males in my life I'm going to orient to? And fortunately for me, I assigned mentors to me, whether or not they knew it or not, that really helped me along, and I changed them up as you recommend. There wasn't one. I understood there was a breaking up process, an integration process, combining and threading together different things. I truly believe that that's what's required. It doesn't have to be 100% Gary Cooper. It can be 10% Robert Greene, 10% someone else, 5% this, and creating a pie chart of sorts of, who one wishes to be in a given context. But that takes work. It takes a bit of work and discernment, but gosh, that's powerful. And really credit goes to you because you were a mentor of mine. You didn't even realize it in the way that you forge and organize information. And there were others. But Mastery is where I learned to do that. And this is not a podcast, it's a sales pitch for Mastery, but gosh, it really taught me, okay, I have a graduate advisor. She was wonderful and brilliant, but she didn't know how to explain a lot of things to me, so I'd find someone else for that.
Right.
And someone else for the other thing, and someone else for the other thing, and together create a patchwork of really excellent mentors that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think there's a role for that process that you spell out in Mastery in the larger context of who to become as a person, and that includes masculine and feminine ideals.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing process throughout your life. So who you glommed onto when you were 14 or 15 will change when you're 19. I had a series of people like you're talking about. My high school English teacher who had an enormous impact on me, who taught me basically how to write. I internalized his voice. When I went to Berkeley, I had a professor there who became my kind of surrogate father at Berkeley, who I deeply admired for his level of scholarship. So he became kind of an intellectual role model. Later in life, when I finally wrote my first book, I met a man, Joost Elfers, who was a book packager who understood the business, etc. He kind of saved me. He was sort of my mentor for the next phase in my life. So on and on and on, I found people, but they have positive qualities that I admire. They're not perfect. Everyone is flawed. And so at some point, maybe you see too many of the flaws. You go on, I need somebody new in my life. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like you're violating any codes or hurting them. You move on to somebody else. But the sense of finding people whose qualities you admire, we don't learn from people just by following their ideas. We pick up their energy, their spirit. Now, you didn't necessarily pick up my energy or spirit from reading Mastery, although maybe you did, I don't know. But when you're interacting with that professor at Stanford or whatever, it's not just verbally, there's kind of a nonverbal communication going on. You're internalizing some of the positive qualities that you saw in them and finding these series of mentors, because I call it surrogate parents. You can't choose your father and mother, but you can choose these ideals for you. You can choose these mentors in your life. You can kind of rewrite your family history and find that father figure you never had by glomming onto this person. But it has to be the right fit. It has to be someone that you connect to emotionally and intellectually, that has the positive qualities you wish for yourself.
Well, I'll embarrass you perhaps by saying that since I was a freshman in college, which is really when I turned my academic life around and really my life around, I've maintained the same notebook with a list of names of people that I admire and who I'm trying to emulate in some way, not in every way, certainly. And certain names have been crossed off, but most of them have survived. And certainly after reading Mastery, your name made that list. And
I hope I'm not being crossed off.
No, not at all. Not at all. And through reading Mastery, there were additional names. I had the great misfortune of having all three of my academic advisors die, suicide, cancer, which sounds tragic. The joke in my field is you don't want me to work for you. That's what everyone says. But by being essentially scientifically orphaned, because there's a strong mentor-mentee relationship in science and progression through the career track, it forced me to go out and find other people and also to learn how to, quote unquote, mother and father myself in the context of profession. And I got a lot of help. But I can't emphasize enough how valuable that practice is. And so when one looks out on the landscape of social media options, I mean, these are literally just options of people to, we call it following, but it probably should be called something else, because following, falls short of emulating or attempting to emulate. But I think that in the context of masculine and feminine ideals, this is so critical. But it's like the buffet of food is so enormous now, right? I mean, you've got every cuisine on the table.
And
so
we're not wired for that.
No.
And I know personally, I get very agitated and upset if I go to the market and I have to choose between 30 items and I have no idea what I want. It makes me really cranky and upset. Whereas if I know, okay, I cannot have this food, I can't have that, I'm only looking for this, okay, it's easy. It doesn't take 2 hours to waste my time. Too much choice is very detrimental to the human being, I think. And that's why, going back to what I originally said, when you have that sense of purpose about your life, about what's important, it not just affects your career, but it affects everything you do. So eating this food is going to drain me of my energy that I need to create this thing that means so much to me. And energy and feeling my brain active and alive is an incredibly important value. All right, I'm not going to eat all that sugar because it's bad for me, right? It means I'm not going to get outraged by these things on the internet because it's a waste of time. I can't do anything about it. It's just feeding on I forget the part of the brain that's like the amygdala or whatever, right? So no, I don't want to go there, right? And on and on and on. All these things in social media, yeah, some of it's good, some of it's interesting. I can follow Andrew Huberman's podcast and I enjoy that and I learn a lot from him. But a lot of these podcasts are useless. They're not helping me in any way. So it gives you this kind of filter and this radar to cut out those 100 different choices that drive us absolutely crazy. And I know maybe I'm a little bit, I don't know, I say that maybe I'm partially on the spectrum or something, but I can't stand too many choices. It completely drives me nuts. So I always have to kind of funnel my energy into something, the things that are productive. And having a sense of your purpose, whatever you discovered in your 20s, hopefully, gives you that ability to say, these are the positive role models I want in my life. These are the mentors. And the thing about following people on social media, it's so easy, it's just a click. It doesn't mean anything. A mentor relationship takes work. It takes courage because you have to actually go up to somebody and physically ask for their help. And a lot of people write to me saying, I'm afraid of asking this important, powerful person to be their mentee, right? So it involves a sense of social courage where you have to literally engage with another human being who you admire and think is powerful. So it's building your social skills, etc. But it's a skill you develop. You can't just follow someone. You can't just watch their lectures. You have to engage with them, and you have to get over some of your fears and your anxieties in the process.
Yeah, I might add to it. I think everything you said is absolutely true. I think engaging in the various tools that they recommend is immensely helpful. Like I think hearing about a book is great. Reading a book is even better. Thinking about a book that you read is even better than that. And then writing down your own ideas and writing a book, well, that's the big win, right? And that's what the world, I believe, that's what the universe wants from us. Not necessarily to write a book, but translate what I just said to any number of different languages.
Hey, you want to be able to think for yourself, right? So you're not just absorbing ideas from other people and kind of mimicking them and kind of just learning the exteriors of their ideas. You want to kind of digest them and then have them slowly become your own ideas by interacting with them, by putting them through your own lens. So someday, it's a book stirring in me is the art of thinking, how to use that kind of process and go deeper into it. And I talked a lot about it in one of my podcasts, which might be the seed of a book. But it's the difference between dead thinking and alive thinking. Ideas can be either alive or they can be dead. And an alive idea is something that enters your brain from an external source, a philosopher, an article, somebody you admire, somebody you hate. And then you absorb it and you think about it and you decide, I'm going to turn it around into this and I'm going to make it alive and make it something that's part of me. Another part of an alive idea is you have an idea that comes to you about a book or a project or something about the world, and you go, maybe that's not actually true. Maybe the opposite is true. And you go through a process and you cycle through it on and on, and you reflect on it and you refine this idea. And maybe it turns into its opposite. And through the process of reflecting and correcting and revising it, you turn it into something living, something alive within you, right? On and on and on. And what prevents people from going through that process, which would be the subject of my book, is basically anxiety. Because I think how you handle anxiety is the most important kind of quality in life. It'll determine whether you will be successful, whether you will find your career path, or whether you won't be able to. I don't know if you can follow that idea at all. But anxiety is a signal to you that you don't understand something, that there's a problem out there that you can't resolve. And so what happens to most people if you're insecure is you glom onto something instant and easy to get rid of your feeling of anxiety. I don't understand this problem. Oh, it must be A. A must be the answer because this person said that, right? And so you don't develop the ability to think. You don't develop the ability to go to the next level. So if you take that anxiety and you go, right, maybe A is the answer. And then you start going through A and then you go, no, maybe A isn't the answer. Maybe B is the answer. You're able to surmount your anxiety and go past and further and further and further. You don't rush for the first available answer that's out there. You're able to go through a process of refining things. And so in your career, if you're anxious for success, if you're anxious for money, you're going to make the wrong choices. But if you're able to deal with that anxiety and say, maybe I have to think more deeply about where I'm going. I have to come up with other alternatives. Then you're going to make a much better choice. So if you're a creative person, it's very, very challenging to have that blank piece of paper before you, that book that you haven't written, that film or whatever. You're filled with a lot of anxiety, and you have to deal with it. And if you're able to turn it into something creative and productive, then great things will happen. You'll create a masterpiece. So the ability to deal with anxiety and to not give in to the most instant gratification that you can get is, to me, a marker of somebody who will be creative and will invent something, as opposed to people who just recycle old and dead ideas.
Amen to that. I was once told that anxiety makes children of us all, and not in the positive sense of being childlike.
Yeah.
It regresses us to a mode where we feel a complete lack of control, and I completely agree that being able to manage anxiety and work dance with it,
Yeah.
since we can't rid ourselves of it.
No.
Perhaps nor should we, right? Because it's a signal, as you point out, that we don't understand something, that there's something to get curious about,
Right.
a process or something out there, or both. I think that really resonates.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will benefit from hearing that, because I think we hear the word flow and we just all imagine. I even catch myself imagining that, when Robert Greene sits down to write, it's like there's a blank sheet and then he just kind of meditates and then boom, out come these books. But if I get realistic for a second, I'm sure that there's a lot of inner turmoil and anxiety.
Oh my God, you have no idea. So my process is 95% pain and maybe 2.5% ecstasy, and I don't know what the other 2.5% would be. But so I write a story, because in my new book and most of my books, I always begin with a story from history, etc. It is so bad. I can't believe how bad, how flat it is, how it sucks. I'm so embarrassed. I hate myself. And I go and I dig into it and I start changing the words and I start making it a little bit better. The second version, it's kind of palatable, but it still sucks. If I let it out into the world, it'd be very embarrassing. It's anxious, and my wife can tell you, I'm a miserable being when that happens. Everything looks black to me at that point. And I push through it. So if I gave in to my anxiety, and this happens with a lot of books and writers, I would just put out that second version, which isn't very good, it isn't very strong. It isn't thought through, because my ideas, when I look at them the first time, I go, that's not real, that's not the actual thing that's going on here, Robert. You've missed the mark. You want to hit what's actually real in that story. So you have to go deeper and deeper and harder and harder and harder. So I don't just give up and go, here's the chapter. I go, it's gotta be better, it's gotta be better. Until finally, after 2 months of struggling, it seems like it's gone to the place that I want it to be in, right? But I use that anxiety to keep improving and making better. And then when I reach that point and the story is good enough and I can let my wife read it and then my editor, I feel great. I have that 2% moment of joy. But it came through all of that anxiety. But I can tell you, the feeling of fulfillment when I finish a chapter is pretty damn great. When I finish a book, it's better than any kind of drug experience anyone could ever have. It's such a wonderful feeling of accomplishment and pushing past all the barriers, So my process involves a lot of anxiety and dealing. That's why I'm talking about it. I want to write a book about it.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm attempting to write a book and have been for several years, and now I feel a little bit better, but clearly I need to ratchet down harder. But in other domains of life, I am familiar with the experience of tons of anxiety of just, okay, I'm going to just get to this one milestone and then I'll figure out the next milestone. But even that process of saying, okay, I'm going to break this down into milestones itself is anxiety provoking.
Sure.
It's just that, but at some point it generates enough inertia that you just sort of stumble forward into the process and then keep going. So try not to bloody oneself too much.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will benefit from hearing about that. In fact, I'm certain they will. So speaking of anxiety, you have a clip on the internet that we will provide a link to in the show note captions, which I think is absolutely fabulous, about how to find a romantic partner and or get more out of an existing romantic partnership.
I don't even remember what I said. You're going to have to remind me.
Oh, it's so good. One point in particular that I remember that I think is oh so true is that there needs to be at least one and probably several points of like real convergence in terms of one's interests or likes that go beyond like what food somebody likes or what type of house they want to live in, but that actually traces back to these early forms of delight. And you mentioned that for you, and therefore presumably your partner, that a mutual love and respect for animals happens to be one of those things within the context of your relationship, right? But not that a love for animals is required.
For me, it sure as hell is.
Right, exactly.
I could never go out with a woman who didn't love animals.
Right. My sister used to tease me that if a woman gave me a birthday card or a card that had a drawing of a particular animal, which I'm particularly fond of, my sister I have an older sister, and she used to say, "Oh no, it's over. He's gone." That it would, fortunately, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
But there's some truth to what she was saying. It's certainly it's necessary, but not sufficient. But maybe you could elaborate a little bit on this notion of convergent interest and contrast it with a lot of what people tend to hear and say about what's important in partnership. Because I think this is something that a lot of people grapple with, both in terms of finding a partner and in terms of building partnership.
Well, you have to, there's different relationships you can have. I mean, do you want like a 1 week, a 1 month relationship, or are you looking for something longer, more satisfying, that will entail, maybe years of being together? And, people can get very boring very quickly, right? Particularly if you can't have a conversation with them about subjects that interest you. And so, you mentioned animals. Animals is a very good example, because I'm not saying that you both have to be Democrats or Republicans. That's too banal and superficial. But the love of animals reaches into your character, reaches something deep inside you, or your dislike of animals. That happens to be the case. But it signals something about it that's so primal, that's so connected to a child, that there's going to be a deep connection there. And it's not like you have to both love cats, which is good if that happens to be the case, but just animals in general. You love their energy. You love the fact that they're innocent in their own way. You love the fact that they're not playing games with you. You love the kind of instant love you can get from them, kind of thing. And you connect to them on that level is a very, very positive sign, because it goes beyond just intellectual things into something emotional and visceral. So really, the emotional connections and values that you have together are very important. Money is another one that's extremely important. So one is incredibly material oriented, and it's all about money is power and success and comfort. And the other isn't really into it, is into spending money, etc. A lot of people have endless fights over something like money, right? Where there's no convergence there. And money signals a deeper value about the person. So there's something wrong if money motivates you. I'm not moralizing about it, because that can signal a value that maybe you grew up without it, and that feeling comfortable, feeling like you don't have to worry about something, is very, very important to you. And the not being interested in money reveals something about your character. So I'm telling people, you want to look at the person's character and see a kind of convergence there, something that can last. And I remember I was reading one of my books about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt. And the thing of it was, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was this incredibly handsome, vibrant young man before he got polio. Very active, very athletic, very handsome. All of the women were after him. He was like the perfect match. He was wealthy. And Eleanor Roosevelt was like the ugly duckling. She wasn't very pretty. She was kind of socially awkward. But he saw into her character. He saw intellectually she was a match for him. He saw that they had kind of similar interests on that level that I've talked about that go beneath just the surfaces. And he chose Eleanor, and everyone was shocked about it. Nobody was trying to court Eleanor. I forgot her last name. Actually, I think she might have been Roosevelt. So it was very shocking. He said, I looked at somebody who I could last with, who had some qualities that were much more important, and it ended up being a very satisfying relationship. Of course, later on he had his doubts, so it wasn't perfect, but it was a very positive relationship. So, seeing your values in life, when it comes to like money, when it comes to like career, when it comes to comfort or lack of comfort. Some people like not being comfortable. They like being on the edge. They want challenges. They want to move from city to city, kind of thing. And if you partner with somebody who just wants to live in the same house, you're going to have conflict after conflict after conflict. The sex might be great, and that might be good for a month or 2 months. I have nothing against that. I'm not going to judge that either. But it won't lead to a long-lasting relationship. You know, sports and athletics are another thing. Is it someone that likes the outdoors, or is it someone who's, you know, like Zsa Zsa Gabor has to be in Times Square and in a penthouse in Manhattan, you know, kind of thing. So values that reach inside of a person's character that are deeply ingrained, that you can almost not change, you can't control, but there's a convergence there on several levels, is a sign that you can have a deep connection with that person. It's very important. And if those connections are good and there's a physical attraction, because without the physical attraction, it will kind of fizzle out. You've got a recipe for incredible success, for something that can really last. And having a lasting relationship, as I've had, is such an anchor in your life. You know, for me, for someone who works as hard as I do, and hopefully for her as well, it just grounds me and it makes life so much simpler, easier, and it's not just simple and easy, there's a lot of love and a great deal of deeper emotions involved. But having a long-term relationship, if you can have it, is something that pays off so many dividends. So being able to find that kind of convergence. You know, when I first met my wife, I had a cat at the time. I'd always been a dog person, but this was a cat I had, and I loved that cat. My cat, such a wonderful cat. I brought her over to my work
for purchase.
I wanted to see her reaction to the cat.
Placement hold
So
left. How can I go about it?
Women who don't like cats, I don't get along with, right? Because there's something feline in the feminine nature that I love. She loved my cat. Boy, that was the best sign of all. Things just lost, and she loved me for loving a cat. So there was a great
Hi,
convergence
Tony.
right there.
I
That we saw
just
right away. And there were
arrived
other
with
things, but that was
our,
the first one.
purchase.
That story and everything you just said suggests, I believe, that in order to find the right partner, to build an existing partnership that hopefully feels at least partially right to people, that it requires at least some knowing of self. Because unless you know your character, one's own character, then it's impossible to really determine if somebody else's character is going to mesh well with it or not.
Self-awareness is actually the most important quality in life for all aspects. But yeah, I mean, if we go by social pressures, a man will choose a trophy wife who looks sexy and hot, and will impress all of his male friends, etc., etc. You go by the things that culture tells you that these are the right images for you, right? And then there won't be any connection to you because you're choosing for purposes that don't connect to who you are. And so you have to know yourself. You have to know what you love. You have to know what you hate. I think most people know that they love animals or don't love animals. I think most people know that they like stability or they like things to be kind of slightly chaotic. I don't think you have to go through deep levels of introspection. But what you have to do is when you're involved in a relationship, you have to think that those things matter. That's the problem. You tend to think those things, but you think that sex matters more than anything, physical attraction matters. Or you think that the person having a lot of money matters, etc., etc. You don't think that this other aspect is important. If you value what I'm talking about, then your self-awareness will kick in because you really basically know these essential basic parts about your character.
People sometimes get distracted by admiration of qualities that they might find admirable, but that don't mesh with their own character. I've seen this many times before, where someone will say, someone will start listing off the positive attributes of the person that they happen to be dating. Like, he does this, blank, blank, and blank. She does this. He volunteers, etc. And that's all great. Volunteering for good causes, I'm all in support of that. But then, what they're overlooking often, it seems, is whether or not that's core value for them, or whether or not it's just something that they admire. I hear a lot of admiration in the early days of relationships that later I hear about failing. And what you're talking about is something deeper, more aligned with one's own sense of self, and it almost leads me to use the word, sort of we're about energetics. It's like merging of people's energies, which sounds very new age. That's not my intention, but I think it relates to something that we do hear a lot about, and I think is valid, which is how it feels to be around somebody in different contexts. Like, do we feel at ease? Do we feel lightness and ability to express ourselves, and do we enjoy and admire them in their expression, as opposed to just admiring what they do? They've accomplished blank, blank, and blank, right? They've manifested these qualities that I wish I had, like that, and aspired to have, which is very different than a meshing of energies.
Also, a couple of the things, you have to understand their character as well. People can be very deceptive, very slippery, can wear masks. One telling sign that I've noticed in my own relationships in the past is that the woman would be a certain way with me that I thought was very good and I liked. And then the moment we were with other people, she acted in a way that was very irritating. And it's like a different character. And I really kind of fell out of love with her. I saw her in social interactions. She revealed, so with me, she was almost wearing a mask and playing a game. But the moment she entered a different circumstance, I saw another aspect to her character. So you also have to be very attentive to their character, what lies underneath, that they have some of these values. They're not just trying to win you over.
Hi, you're visible. You're the wireless company with nothing to hide. Seriously, hidden fees? We don't have them. Annual con?
When marketers fail to differentiate their customers, the results can be scary. This customer is full of shoppers who haven't bought from you in a long time.
It's been a long time.
With MailChimp, you can create highly personalized marketing across email and SMS to win back shoppers.
I'm back, baby.
Turn lost customers into repeat customers with Intuit MailChimp.
Some people just know that the best rate for you is a rate based on you, not Paul. You don't want to ride with Paul. Get a rate based on you with DriveWise and the Allstate app.
Food for work has to work. That's why there's Easy Cater. 100,000 restaurants, one platform. With easy online ordering and reordering. So you can get food for work without the work. Start an order at easycater.com.
Hyundai Kona versus Subaru Crosstrek. Look what Kona has and what Crosstrek doesn't. Hyundai Kona wins every time. This is a cluster full of browsers who aren't buying.
Just browsing.
With MailChimp, marketers can target these browsers using real-time behavior data to personalize product recommendations and discount offers. Turn browsers into buyers with Intuit MailChimp.
A Verbo is for sharing all kinds of moments. From teeing off to spilling the tea. Because with a Verbo, it's always just you, your people, and no one else.
Totalmente, llámame con un plan ilimitado desde 25 al mes.
Get a Samsung Galaxy A15 5G on us when you switch. Total by Verizon.com.
hotel says it's dog friendly doesn't mean a dog will find it very friendly. Get an Airbnb that's friendly for everyone.